Putin built his entire war on one unshakable belief, that Russia could always strike Ukraine and Ukraine could never strike back. That belief is now being dismantled, weapon by weapon. And the one that just changed everything isn't American. It isn't European. It was built in Ukraine by Ukrainians, and it has Moscow in its crosshairs. If you follow this war closely, what you're about to hear will genuinely shock you, because even the analysts didn't see this coming this fast. If this kind of daily intelligence on the Ukraine war matters to you, stick around. We break down what the mainstream media misses every single day. Ukraine just unveiled the FP9, a domestically engineered ballistic missile that doesn't just match Russia's most feared battlefield weapon, the Iskander. It beats it in range, in payload, in psychological impact. And it was shown to the world at the April Road to Ukraine Recovery Conference in Poland, sitting right next to its smaller sibling, the FP7, in what can only be described as Ukraine's most defiant public statement since the war began. 2 ballistic missiles, side by side, built from scratch, aimed east. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers are brutal. According to Defense Express, the FP9 carries a conventional warhead weighing up to 800 kilograms. That's over 1,700 pounds of destruction, and can deliver it to a target 855 kilometers away. That's 531 miles. For context, Russia's Iskander M, the missile that has been raining terror on Ukrainian cities for 4 years, maxes out at 500 kilometers with a 700-kilogram warhead. The FP9 wins on every metric that matters: range, payload, and size. Based on the prototype dimensions, the FP9 stretches approximately 9.5 meters long with a 1.1 meter diameter, making it physically larger than anything Russia currently launches from the ground against Ukraine. The Iskander has been Putin's hammer. The FP9 is Ukraine's answer, and it hits harder. Don't go anywhere. What comes next about the air-launched variant of this missile is the part that has Russian defense planners genuinely losing sleep. Now here's where it gets darker for the Kremlin. The FP9 isn't a cruise missile like Ukraine's Flamingo drone hybrid. It's a ballistic missile, which means it travels at velocities that air defense systems struggle to intercept. Russia knows exactly how to deal with drones. It's had years of practice, but a ballistic missile screaming down from altitude at hypersonic adjacent speeds is a categorically different threat. Ukraine has used American-supplied ATACMS against Russian targets, but that system has always come with Washington's permission attached. Use it only when approved. Target only what we authorize. That leash has defined Ukraine's ballistic options since day one. The FP9 has no leash, no American approval required, no political strings. Ukraine can point it wherever its commanders decide, and with an 855-kilometer range, those commanders can now reach the Moscow region from Ukrainian soil. That's not a threat. That's a new military reality. The FP7, the FP9's shorter-range companion, is already in live-fire testing. Footage exists. It works. Modeled externally on the Russian 48N6 air defense missile, a deliberate design shortcut that Firepoint says dramatically accelerated development, the FP7 carries Ukrainian materials, Ukrainian guidance systems, and Ukrainian engineering underneath that familiar silhouette. Its 200-kilometer range makes it a precision blade for strikes against occupied territories and frontier targets. If the FP9 is Ukraine's strategic hammer, the FP7 is its surgical knife. Both are expected to be codified for use by the Ukrainian armed forces as early as summer 2026. Mass production follows codification automatically, which means Ukraine could be launching these missiles within months. But Firepoint isn't finished, and this is the detail that elevates the FP9 from a powerful ground weapon into something that rewrites the strategic map entirely. The FP9's designer, Denny Steelerman, confirmed in an April 6 United 24 media report that an air-launched variant of the FP9 is already in development. Fired from a combat aircraft at altitude, the missile would require no fuel for the climb phase, meaning that energy gets redirected entirely into range. An air-launched FP9 could plausibly approach the reach of Russia's own Kinzhal, the air-launched ballistic missile that Putin has repeatedly used as a symbol of Russian technological dominance. Ukraine's answer, built in a war zone, funded by a country fighting for survival, would carry nearly double the Kinzhal's warhead weight. Think about what that means. Russia spent decades and billions developing an air-launched ballistic missile as a prestige weapon. Ukraine is about to field a comparable system in roughly 4 years of wartime production. This is also why Ukraine conducted 492 documented strikes against Russian air defense systems between June 2025 and March 2026. Every radar destroyed, every launcher silenced, every air defense node removed from the battlefield was not just tactical housekeeping, it was preparation. Ukraine has been methodically clearing the corridors its future missiles will need to travel uncontested. The drone swarms weren't just harassment, they were architects. And now consider the target picture. An 855-kilometer range from Ukrainian-held territory puts the Moscow region well within reach. The Kremlin, the symbolic and operational heart of Putin's government, sits inside that radius. Ukraine has struck the Moscow region with drones before. The first strike in May 2023 was described as a humiliation for Putin. By 2025, Ukraine was launching 91 drone waves over Moscow in a single night. But drones can be shot down in bulk. A ballistic missile is a fundamentally different conversation. Even the threat of FP9 changes Russian air defense calculus permanently. Every drone swarm heading toward Moscow from this point forward will force Russia to respond as though ballistic missiles might be hidden inside it. The same psychological saturation tactic Russia has used against Ukraine for years, now reversed and aimed back at the Kremlin. Potential targets aren't limited to the symbolic. The Gazprom-operated Moscow refinery, the primary supplier of transport fuel for the entire Moscow region, sits within range. Putin has worked carefully to insulate Muscovites from the visible costs of his war. Fuel shortages in Russia's capital would shatter that illusion overnight. The civilian population Putin has been shielding from the truth of this conflict would feel it directly, and they would want answers. Putin won't be in the Kremlin when any of this happens, of course. He rarely is. Radio Free Europe revealed in November 2025 that Putin maintains nearly 3 mirror offices built specifically to obscure his location at all times. His absence from his own seat of power isn't coincidence, it's fear wearing a suit. During the early weeks of Operation Epic Fury, he reportedly vacated the Kremlin entirely, terrified of a repeat of what American precision did to Iran's Soleimani. Now, with Ukraine weeks or months from deploying a ballistic missile that can reach his front door, Putin's vanishing act will become permanent. And that creates a problem that missiles can't solve for him. If an FP9 strikes the Kremlin and Putin is nowhere near it, what does that tell the Russian people about their president? What does it reveal about the man who promised Russia strength, security, and invulnerability? The strongman myth doesn't survive a ballistic missile landing in his own capital while he hides in an undisclosed location. Ukraine doesn't need to kill Putin with the FP9. It just needs to hit something important. The symbolism alone could fracture something inside Russia that 4 years of battlefield losses haven't managed to break. This is the moment the war quietly changed shape, not with a ceasefire, not with a peace summit, but with a ballistic missile prototype standing on a display floor in Poland, pointing east, built by a country that was never supposed to fight back this hard. Russia has fired hundreds of Iskander missiles at Ukrainian cities. On April 15th alone, Russia launched 24 Iskanders in a single wave, part of a 24-hour barrage that saw 703 weapons fired at Ukraine. A confirmed 15,578 Ukrainian civilians have been killed, over 43,000 wounded. Putin chose this. Ukraine didn't start this war. It's choosing how to finish it. And finishing it, increasingly, looks like giving Russia's capital a reason to understand what Kiev has lived through for 4 years. The FP9 isn't just a missile. It's a message, and Moscow is about to receive it. If you want to stay ahead of every development in this war before it hits the headlines, you already know where to be. Subscribe and make sure you hit the bell, because we track this daily, and the next update may be the one that changes everything.